Okay, good afternoon everyone. Shalom Aleichem, Bruchim Abayim. We have an amazing topic today. Today's topic, instead of being on the Parsha, is a subject relevant to the events that are occurring right now in our time. These are the events that are on everyone's mind. The war in Eretz Yisrael, the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, where they came on the most joyous day of the year, and they killed, and they maimed, and they assaulted, and unfortunately they took hostages. That will be the topic of today's shiur, redeeming captives in Halacha. Redeeming captives in Halacha. I want to wish everyone good afternoon. Bruchim Abam to the Kollel Agra de Pirka. We have good news. The upcoming Sefer on Reb Meir Baal HaNes in English is being prepared for publication, hopefully for Hanukkah, if anybody wants to participate in that project. Also, we have a new series this year of Torah Illuminated. The first edition was released last night. It's called Secrets of the Chodesh. You could see it on Torah Anytime, on Torah Zoom, on many platforms. If anybody would want to be a patron of that series, you could contact us. Today we're speaking about a very sensitive subject, but a subject that's on everyone's mind, redeeming captives. We hope HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us nitzachon and we're able to release whatever our brothers and sisters that are in captivity. We're going to speak today about the mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuyim. The Rambam says in Hilchos Matnas Aniyim, Parak Ches Halacha Yud, Pidyon Shvuyim Koidem Lefarnasas Aniyim Ulchsoisan. Redeeming captives takes precedence over supporting the poor and covering them. Ve'ein lecha mitzvah gedola kepidyon shvuyim. There's no greater mitzvah than redeeming captives. Shahashavoy, one who's in captivity, harihu b'chlal hara'ivim, v'hatzmeim, v'ha'arumim, v'oimed b'sakanas nefashos. Someone who's in captivity, he's considered in the category of hungry, thirsty, unclothed, and his life is in danger. V'hamal ameinov mipidyoinai, one who hides his eye from redeeming him. Hareza oivar aloy sa'amitzas levavcha. He is violating. Do not harden your heart. V'loy sikpaitzas yadcha. Do not close your hand. He's violating. V'aloy samin al dam reyacha. Don't stand idly by your friend's blood. V'aloy yardenu beferach le'einecha. And not to oppress him. Don't allow your friend to be oppressed in slavery before your eyes. You're being mevatel the mitzvah of opening up your hand to your friend. And the mitzvah of allowing your brother to live with you. And the mitzvah of love your friend, your neighbor like yourself. V'hatzel lekuchim lamaves, that's a pasuk in Mishlei. Save those who are taken for death. V'harbe dvarim ke'elu. And many, many mitzvahs. In other words, the mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuyim is a mitzvah and an opportunity that's all-inclusive of pretty much all the categories of chesed. Ve'ein lecha mitzvah rabba k'Pidyon Shvuyim. There's no greater mitzvah than Pidyon Shvuyim. So you look at the Rambam and you see the value, the importance of the mitzvah Pidyon Shvuyim. So one would think that there are no restrictions, that you pay as much money as necessary, and at all costs you redeem captives. But like probably many of you are familiar, the Gemara does put a cap on the mitzvah Pidyon Shvuyim. The Gemara says in Gittin, it's a Mishnah, Ein poidin es hashvuyim yasar al k'dei d'meyan. We do not redeem captives more than their value. Mimnei tikkun ha'olam, because of rectification for the world, because of tikkun ha'olam. In other words, even though you would say that the kol hamatzil nefesh achas miyisrael ki'ilu hitzil olam malei, so how could you put a value on one Jewish life? Nevertheless, there's a market value, whether it's the amount of money somebody would be sold for as a slave, or the amount of work somebody could bring in. There's an objective value, just like there's a value on a couch and a car. There is an objective market value, and the Mishnah says in Gittin, we are not permitted to redeem captives more than their value, because of the rectification of the world. So now the question is, what does that mean, the rectification of the world? What exactly are we rectifying? What is the issue at hand? So the Gemara says, Ibailuhu. The Gemara, the Bnei Yeshiva, had the following question. Hai mibnei tikkun ha'olam. What is this rectification of the world? One possibility is misham duchka de tzibura. It's because of the oppression of the community. What's going to happen if the terrorists say, okay, you want to allow your relative to be released? It's going to be $100 million. Okay, so you'll have a charity campaign, and all the communities of the world will gather together, and they'll raise $100 million, and everyone in every shul will give $1,000. So the terrorists will say, hey, well, this is a good business. Who needs to go into nursing homes? We could just go into terrorism. So tomorrow, they'll capture someone else, and they'll keep on doing it. So you say, okay, so we'll keep on doing a mitzvah. But ultimately, it's a hardship on the tzibur. So maybe the reason we don't pay more than the $5,000 that somebody's worth, because ultimately it's going to place an undue hardship on the tzibur. Not everyone could afford to pay that kind of money every day. So is it because we don't want to put an undue hardship on the tzibur? Or maybe mishum delay ligravu v'laisu tfei. Maybe it's not because we don't want to put an undue hardship on the tzibur, but what it's going to do is it's going to incite more terrorism, because then terrorism pays off. If the terrorists know that every time someone gets captured, we're going to pay big bucks to have them released, they're going to constantly do this. So it's not because of the undue hardship on the tzibur, but rather we cannot incite these chalerias to keep at it. Rashi points out, Rashi says, what does it mean, duchka de tzibura? Rashi says, ein lanu lidchai kat tzibur, we cannot oppress the tzibur, and bring them to poverty. Or maybe Rashi says, we don't want the Gentiles to sacrifice in order to grab and kidnap more, because they command a hefty price. What would the nafkamina be between these two reasons of why we can't pay Yesar Mikdei Demayim? Whether it's because of the oppression of the tzibur, or we're inciting the terrorists to capture more. Rashi says a very simple nafkamina is if you have a rich relative. Let's say someone has a rich father or a rich uncle who is willing to pay the $100 million. If it's because it poses an undue hardship on the tzibur, so then the rich relative could say, look, it's a free country. I have an extra $100 million. I'm entitled to pay it, and it's not coming out of your pocket. What's the problem? But if it's because we don't want to inspire and incite the terrorists to keep on doing it, then it doesn't matter who's paying the money. If they're getting big bucks, we cannot allow so much money to be paid to release a captive. So it's irrespective of who's paying the money. If it's because it presents an undue hardship on the tzibur, then it's only a problem if the tzibur is paying for it. If it's because we don't want the terrorists to keep capturing captives, then it doesn't matter who's paying the money. So we have a story. The story appears later on in the Gemara in Gittin, on Daf Nun Ches. The story goes like this. This is one of the most famous captives in history. Tana Rabbanan, Masab Rabbi Shua ben Chananya. There's a story with Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, Shahalach lekrach gadol shabaraymi. He went to the great metropolitan of Rome. Amrulay, they said to him, Tinaik echad yesh v'beiso asurim. There's a young child in the jail, Yifei einayim, beautiful eyes, v'toiv roi, very handsome, uktsoisav sturois loy taltalim. He has very elegant payas. Halach v'amar al Pesach beis hasurim. He went and he stood by the entrance of the jail. Amar, he started by saying the beginning of the pasuk. Minasan l'meshisa Yaakov v'Yisrael l'boizezin. Who gave to be trampled Yaakov and Yisrael to be taken plundered? That's the beginning of a pasuk. And this young child in the jail hears the pasuk, and he then finishes off the pasuk. V'amar oisa ana oisa tinaik v'amar halai zu halai Hashem zu chatanulai v'lai avu bedrachav halaich v'lai shamu b'sayrasai. Basically, this person said that the child finished up the pasuk. So Rabbi Shua ben Chananya said, this child is destined for greatness. Amar muftichani bai, I am vouchsafed about him. Shamayra Rabbi Yisrael, that he will one day paskin shilas for Klal Yisrael. Ho'avoida, I swear, she'ini zaz mikan, I will not move from here. Ad she'avtenu b'chamaman she'bhoiskin alav, that I'll pay all the money in the world. Amru, so they said, lo zaz misham, he didn't move ad shepada b'mam and harba, until he redeemed him with a lot of money. It was not a few days ad shehayra b'Yisrael, meaning in no short time this child began to develop into a paisek. And who was he? Umani Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha. So basically in this story, the child was prisoner, and Rabbi Shua ben Chananya pledged to pay all the money in the world. So Tosafot is bothered by the obvious question. The Mishnah says, "Ein poidin es hashvuyin yaser mikdei demeyan." How could Rabbi Shua ben Chananya redeem the captive for more money than the captive was worth? But the Mishnah says in Gittin on Daf Memhei, "Ein poidin es hashvuyin yaser mikdei demeyan." Whether it's because we don't want to pressure the tzibor, or whether it's because shaloi limsar nafshayu v'ligravi tvei, either way, you're not allowed to do it. So how could Rabbi Shua ben Chananya do this? This is the kasha of Tosafot and Gittin on Daf Memhei. Says Tosafot, Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, the parke lahu tinoik b'mamain harbe b'hanizakin. Why? This is Tosafot on Daf Memhei on the Mishnah of Ein Poidin as Hashvuyin Yeser Mikdei Demeyan. Asked Tosafot, how could Rabbi Shua ben Chananya redeem the child for more than the value? Answer number one, Lafi Shahaya Muflag B'chachma. The child was special. He was exceptional in wisdom. And therefore, for such a person, for such an individual, you're allowed to redeem for more than their value. That's the first answer of Tosafot. Again, we'll have to think, doesn't it pose an undue hardship on the tzibur? Doesn't it incite the terrorists to capture more? We have to think about that. Inami, another answer, B'shas churban habayis lo shayach d'lo ligravu. If it's at the time of the churban of the Beis HaMikdash, what's the reason you're not to redeem captives for more than their value? You're going to inspire the terrorists to capture more. But anyway, that's what they're doing. It's the time of the Churban. What are the Gentiles doing at the time of the Churban? That's what they're doing. They're kidnapping. They're grabbing. They're holding hostages. So the whole reason you're not to redeem, not to inspire them to capture more. You're not inspiring them to capture more. That's what they're doing at that time. These are the two answers of Tosafot. Either the child was muflag b'chachma, or the time of the churban habayis is different. The prohibition of loy shayach, it's not shayach to loy ligravu. Fine. Comes Tosafot on Daf Nun Ches, and Tosafot on Daf Nun Ches gives two other answers. One of them is the same as he gives on Daf Memhei, and one of them is different. Says Tosafot, you know why Rabbi Shua ben Chananya was allowed to redeem this child for more than his value? Says Tosafot, Ki ika sakanas nefashos poidin shvuyin yoser al kedei demeyan. When someone's life is in danger, you're allowed to redeem captives for more than their value. Kedamrinam beparak hashaleach If someone's life is in danger, you're allowed to redeem them for more than their value. Like we say in Hasholeach, someone who sells himself or his children to Oidei Kechavim. Kol shekein hachad ika katala. Certainly here where there is a threat of death. So now Tosafot is introducing a new factor, that if someone's life is in danger, you're allowed to redeem them more than their value. Inami, Tosafot here says the first answer he gave earlier, Mishum de muflag b'chachma haya, or because this child, Yishmael, who would later be Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha, was exceptional in wisdom. The bottom line is, there are two Tosafot who both ask that if you can't redeem captives for more than their value, then how could Rabbi Shua ben Chananya redeem the child? And there are three answers in the two Tosafot. Tosafot number one gives two answers. Either he was exceptional in wisdom, or it was the time of the Beis HaMikdash, of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. In the second Tosafot answers that his life was in danger, or because he was exceptional in wisdom. So we could immediately ask, why didn't the first Tosafot say that the child's life was in danger? Why didn't the second Tosafot say that the time of the Churban Beis HaMikdash was different? But in two Tosafot, we have a total of three answers. Now, let's see how we paskin. How do we paskin ultimately the reason why we don't redeem captives for more than their value? Is it because we don't want to place undue hardship on the tzibur, or is it because we don't want the goyim to be inspired to capture more? The Rif and the Ran on Daf Chav Gimel b'Dafei Harif, the Rosh, they say it's a boyi deloyev shita. It's a shaila that has no conclusion. Meaning the Gemara does not tell us, bottom line, what's the reason that you're not allowed to redeem captives for more than their value. However, the Rambam does give a definitive reason. Comes the Rambam, and the Rambam says, Ein poidin es hashvuyim b'yeser al dameyan mibnei tikkun ha'olam. Why? Shalayu ha'oivim roidfin achareim l'shvaisam. It's so that the enemy does not pursue them to capture. So the Rambam learns the reason you're not allowed to redeem captives for more than the value is because of shalai ligravu, so they don't gather and grab more. Accordingly, according to the Rambam, even if someone has a rich father or a rich uncle, they would not be allowed to redeem the captives for more than their value. The Shulchan Aruch likewise paskins like the Rambam. If you look at number 8, in Poidin Hashvun Yosem Mechadei Demeim Mimnei Tikkun Ha'olam Shalo Yu Ha'oivim Moisrim Atzmam Aleihem L'Shavaisam. But the Shulchan Aruch says a person is allowed to redeem himself for any amount of money that he wants, or a Talmid Chacham, or even not a Talmid Chacham, but a young Torah scholar that has promise for greatness, you could redeem him for more than their value. So the bottom line is the Rambam seems to be paskening that the reason why we don't redeem captives for more than their value is not to incite the criminals to capture more. So let's begin, because one thing we need to discuss is currently in the state of Israel, would it be permitted to ransom a captive for an exorbitant sum? Again, if you pay that kind of money, are you inspiring them to do it again? Absolutely. Are you putting an undue hardship on the tzibur? You can make the case that that reason doesn't apply anymore, because it's the cost of doing business in New York, as they say. You know, you want to live in the state of Israel. There's an army. People pay taxes. The taxes are not going to go up or down depending on how many captives there are. So you can make the case that if the reason is not to inspire them to do it again, you won't be allowed to. If the reason is not to put an undue hardship on the tzibur, that reason doesn't apply. But nowadays, redeeming captives, it's not about money. it's about exchanging them for terrorists that we've captured. And that's a pretty steep price. I mean, if anyone's been following the news, they know that the mastermind behind the Simchas Torah massacre, I think it was a guy, Sinwar, Yamach Shemai V'Zichroi, who had abducted, kidnapped, and killed an Israeli in 2005. And he was in an Israeli prison as a life sentence. And in exchange for Gilad Shalit, he was released, maybe in 2012 or earlier. And look what he did. Because of him, more than 1,000 Jews were killed. So that's a pretty hefty price. Is that worth it? That may make it that even besides the reason that it's an undue hardship on the tzibur, and aside the reason you're inciting them to do it again, but for the safety and security of the community, could you release a terrorist? I mean, psychologically, a terrorist who's in life prison, who has a life sentence, he's playing with house money when you release him. I mean, what's his life worth? What do you think he's going to do when he comes out? He's going to do community service? He's going to go to an old age home and feed people applesauce? What do you think he's going to do? He's going to bake cookies? These guys we know what they're going to do. So that's something to think about. This was a shaila that came up in the Entebbe raid, where in exchange for releasing our hostages, we were ordered to release 40 terrorists. But basically the Israeli government they stalled, and in the meantime the operation was miraculously successful. But now we're discussing it not from a political standpoint, we're discussing it from a halachic standpoint. So the Maharam Lublin lived from 1558 to 1616. He studied under Rabbi Yitzchak HaKohen Shapira, the Rosh Yeshiva of Krakow, who later chose him as a son-in-law for his daughter Esther. And the Maharam Lublin typically concludes his tshuvos, son-in-law of the king, the great Gaon Maharitz. He established a yeshiva in Lublin at 24. At 29, he served at the Rosh Yeshiva in the Abbezin of Krakow. At 37, he became the Rav Koilel in Lvov, where the Sma was Rosh Yeshiva. He had many prestigious Talmidim, the Shla, Megala Amukais, the Magine Shloimai, the father of the Shach, the Tvuei Shar. And the Maharam Lublin discusses the following amazing shaila. There was a young man who was captured by the Yishmaelim, and they claim that he acted promiscuously with a Ishmaelite harlot, and they wanted to kill him or convert him. And the question is the tzibur chayiv to redeem him? Says the Maharam, of course they're chayiv to redeem him, but they're not allowed to pay a penny more than his value. I don't know why anyone would think that you're obligated to redeem him more than his value. Why would he be different than any other captive, aside from a Talmid Chacham, that you're now to redeem more than their value? Because both reasons of the Gemara apply over here. Number one, it's an undue hardship on the tzibor, and you're inciting the terrorists to kidnap more. Because if you agree on an exorbitant price, they'll do this every day. They'll come every day and claim this guy did this avera, that guy did that avera. Elamai, you'll say, yeah, but they want to kill him. And isn't there a svara if someone's life is in danger, you're allowed to redeem them for more than their value? Says Maharam Lublin. There's not one credible posek who writes that if a Jew's life is in danger, you're allowed to pay a penny more than their value. There's no credible posek that paskins that way. And therefore the Maharam Lublin paskins, it is prohibited. Yes, you're obligated to redeem the person, provided that you're not paying more than his value. The question here, though, Rabbi Isai, is that the Pischei Tshuva, Rabbi Avram Tzvi Eisenstadt, who lived from 1813 to 1865, he wrote Pischei Tshuva at 18 years old. He finished it at 22. He collected many of the prominent tshuvas written before him. He first was a Rav in Bialystok, where he made 3 ruble a week, and then he came to Panovich. They offered him 25 ruble a week. He said he won't even know what to do with it. But in any event, the Pischei Tshuva brings, he quotes many poskim, the Eshel Avram, that if there is a threat to someone's life, you're allowed to redeem him more than their value. And the Yad Eliyahu says even if someone's life is in danger, you don't redeem them more than their value. And he quotes the Maram Lublin, who says that no credible posek says if someone's life is in danger, you redeem them for more than their value. But look in the Beis Hillel, who brings from the Maharshak that clearly the Maram Lublin forgot about Tosafot. What do you mean no credible posek holds that you don't redeem a captive for more than their value? Tosafot is not a credible posek. Tosafot on Daf Nun Ches says that the reason why Rabbi Shua ben Chananya was allowed to redeem Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol is because his life was in danger. And when someone's life is in danger, you're allowed to redeem them for more than their value. So how can Maram and Lublin say that no credible posek says that you're allowed to redeem a captive for more than their value? So that's the question of the hour. That the Maram and Lublin said very confidently that no credible posek holds that if someone's life is in danger, you can redeem them for more than their value. But we saw a Beferish Tosafos that says that Rabbi Shua ben Chananya redeemed Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol because his life was in danger. So comes Shaus Teshuvas Knesses Yecheskel. Rabbi Yecheskel Katzenellenbogen was the Reish Bezin of the communities of Ehu, Altona, Hamburg, Vansbeck. The Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz in the Yaros Davash has 2 Hespedim for Rabbi Cheskel Katzenellenbogen, the author of Shaus Teshuvas Knesses Yecheskel, who lived from 1668 to 1749. And there's a summary of this tshuva in a sefer called Kol Tzofayach. Kol Tzofayach is written by a son-in-law of Rav Lezer Silver. And Rabbi Yecheskel Katzenellenbogen has a brilliant perspective on this whole sugya. We pointed out that the first Tosafos brings 2 answers. That you know why Rabbi Shua ben Chananya redeemed this boy? He was muflag b'chachma. Or because it was at the time of the Chorban. But Tosafos does not say an answer that his life was in danger. On the other hand, the second Tosafos says his life was in danger, or he was muflag b'chachma, but he doesn't give the answers at the time of the Chorban. Comes the Knesses Hagdoila, the Knesses Yecheskel, and he says something brilliant. He says, we really have to study these answers of Tosafos. Let's focus for a moment. Is it reasonable that if someone's life is in danger, you're allowed to redeem them for all the money in the world? But what's the reason you're not allowed to redeem a captive more than their value? Let's think about that. Here you have a guy, Nebuch, he's suffering in prison. Let's say they're not going to kill him. It is definitely not a pleasant situation. You think they let him daven with a minyan? You think they let him daven? You think they're feeding him kosher food? You think they're feeding him? I mean, forget about the fact he doesn't have food. You know what kind of psychological torture he's enduring, if not physical torture? Why would we not have to? I mean, we're Rachmanim. How could we be told, no, you don't have to redeem him for more than his value? Yeah, you could go to your local dealership and buy a Lexus for $70,000, but you can't redeem the poor Jew? What's the logic? The logic is, yeah, but it's going to cause a excessive hardship for the tzibor. But what if his life is in danger? If his life is in danger, then maybe we don't care if it causes an excessive hardship on the tzibor. What's the problem? We're going to be paying too much money, but aren't we obligated to save this person's life? Isn't it a mitzvah of lo samoid al dam reyecha? Does anybody know Loisamad al dam reyecha. How much money does a person have to pay to save someone's life? Someone's drowning. How much money would one have to pay to hire a lifeguard to save another Jew? You got to give up all your money to not to violate a law. So if the reason why we're not allowed to pay more than a person's value is because it's an undue hardship on the tzibor, then we understand Tosafot's answer that if someone's life is in danger, then we would have to pay more than the person's value. Meaning we could understand if the reason why we don't pay more than someone's value is because it's an undue hardship on the tzibor, but not if someone's life is in danger. If someone's life is in danger, we're going to have to do whatever it takes because you have to give up all your money not to violate a law. But if the reason why we're not allowed to redeem captives for more than their value is because it's inspiring the terrorists to do it again, then it won't matter if the person's life is in danger. Because if you're going to say when a person's life is in danger, then you're obligated to pay more than their value, then guess what the terrorists are going to do? They're going to figure out that maybe when we capture Jews, we can't extort them for an exorbitant sum. But when we threaten to kill them, we will get an exorbitant sum. So then they'll capture and threaten people's lives every single day. So whether we're allowed to redeem captives for more than the value when their life is in danger is going to depend on the two answers of the Gemara. If the reason is it's an undue hardship on the tzibor, then if the person's life is in danger, well, too bad it's an undue hardship on the tzibor. But if it's because we don't want to inspire the terrorists to keep on doing this, then we will not be able to redeem captives for more than their value, even if their lives are in danger. Let's talk about the svara that Tosafot says that at the time of the Churban, you're allowed to redeem captives for more than the value. Tosafot clearly says that's because the whole reason you're not allowed to redeem captives is you're causing them to kidnap more. But at the time of the Churban, they're kidnapping anyway, so you're not inspiring them to kidnap more. But according to the reason that it's an undue hardship on the tzibor, then you wouldn't be able to cause an undue hardship on the tzibor even at the time of the Churban. Let's talk about the answer that Tosafot gives, that if somebody is a tremendous scholar, you are allowed to redeem them. What about the fact that it's an undue hardship on the tzibor? Says the Knesset Yechezkel, it would still be an undue hardship on the tzibor. So you wouldn't be able to redeem a great Talmid Chacham. On the other hand, if it's because we don't want them to keep on doing this, then maybe if it's an exceptional Talmid Chacham, they're not going to be able to figure out who's the Talmid Chacham that we're going to redeem, who's not a Talmid Chacham. You could have people with very long beards. They're also very big Amaratzim. You could have people who don't look like big Talmid Chachamim, and they know Shas and Poskim. So even Jews sometimes don't know who's a big Talmid Chacham. You think the terrorists know? So therefore, the various answers and exceptions of when you're allowed to redeem a captive for more than the value will depend on the two answers of the Gemara. But we know the Rambam paskins halacha l'maisa, that the reason why you're not allowed to redeem captives for more than the value is because you're going to be inspiring the terrorists to kill more. In that case, if someone's life is in danger, you're definitely not allowed to redeem them for more than their value. Because you're going to cause the terrorists not only to kidnap, but to then endanger the lives of their hostages. And since the Rambam paskins halacha l'maisa, definitively, not like the Rosh and the Ran, who say the Gemara's question is iboy delay if shita, the Gemara is not giving a definitive rationale why you can't redeem captives for more than the value. According to the Rambam paskins halacha l'maisa, the reason you can't redeem captives is because you're inciting them to to capture more and kidnap more. So then, if their lives are in danger, you're still going to be inspiring them to do this again. Halacha l'maisa, that's why Maram Milublin paskind, there's no credible posek that says that if someone's life is in danger, you could redeem a captive for more than their value. This is the approach of Maram, of Rabbi Glatstein Ellenbogen, to explain why the Maram Lublin says there's no credible posek who says that if someone's life is in danger, you are allowed to pay more than their value. Furthermore, Rabbi say, Rabbi Glatstein Ellenbogen argued that if the reason you can't redeem captives is because it's an undue hardship on the tzibur, but if someone's life is in danger, well, too bad on the tzibur, because you got to give up all your money not to violate a lav, and lo yisamer al dam reyacha is a lav, and you would have to go into your bank, liquidate your bank accounts, and sell all your bitcoins, and sell all of your mutual funds and your stocks, and pay all your money to save the life of another Jew. Comes Rabbi Kiva Eger, and Rabbi Kiva Eger says, it's not so pashut, you got to pay all your money to save the life of another Jew. Yes, you have to pay all your money not to eat chazer. Right? The Shulchan Aruch says, the Ramah says in Yardei Sim Kuf Nun Zayin, V'im yuchal lahatzel atzmai b'chal asher lo yitzarach litein hakol v'lo yavra alo yisaseh. There's a halacha that not to violate an aseh, you only have to pay a fifth of your money. Not to violate a lo yisaseh, you got to pay all your money. So the question is, you would think, not to violate lo yisamer al dam reyacha, it's a lav, you would have to pay all your money. Says Rabbi Kiva Eger, not so fast. Is the barometer of how much money you have to pay, all your money or a fifth, is it that you got to pay all your money not to violate a lav, and a fifth of your money not to violate an aseh? Or rather, you need to pay all your money not to proactively violate the Torah, and you only have to pay a fifth of your money not to passively fulfill the Torah. But let's say you could come up with a lav that you don't violate actively, you violate it passively. Then it would come out, you would only have to pay a fifth of your money. You'd only have to pay a fifth of your money not to violate. He brings on the Chavos Yair in Siman Kuf Lamed Tes that a lav she'ein by ma'isa is like an aseh, and then you don't have to pay all your money not to violate. You'd only have to pay a fifth of your money. In that case, it would not be so clear that just because someone's life is on the line, you would have to pay all your money to save them. Because not saving a life is not an active violation of a lav. It's a passive violation of a lav. I'm just sitting by idly, and I'm standing by idly over my brother's blood. So maybe I would not have to give up all my money not to violate a lav. However, the Rivash says any lav, even a lav she'ein by ma'isa, you got to give all your money not to violate. And in that case, if the rationale of why we don't redeem captives for more than their value is because it's an undue hardship on the tzibur, then in fact, if someone's life is on the line so as not to violate lo yisamer al dam reyacha, you would have to give up all your money. Right now where we're holding is, the Maram Milublin is arguing that since the Rambam definitively says the reason we don't redeem captives for more than their value is because we don't want to incite the terrorists more, even if someone's life is on the line, you can't pay more than their value. Does everybody agree with the Maram Milublin? Absolutely not. The Yam Shel Shloimeh, Rav Shlomo Luria, who was one of the great all-time poskim, the Ramah writes in the Tshuvah Siman Hey, fortunate is the generation that you are in. You're like Moshe Rabbeinu, you're like Gadol Keshamai, Anvasan Kehillel, and any bird that flies on top of you is consumed in fire, like Yonas and Ben Uziel. And we could say about you like we say about the Rambam, and there's no one like you in the generation. The Marami Lublin says something amazing. He said, nowadays, the men of kindness in Turkey, in other communities, let me see, look at number 15. In other communities in proximity, they redeem captives for much, much more than their value. Duchka de tzibura. The first thing Yam Shel Shlomo says, undue hardship, they're moichel the hardship. Hashem should reward them. Their reward is vouchsafed for the world to come. But then the Yam Shel Shlomo says another very stirring idea. He says the Yam Shel Shlomo, there's so few Jews left in the world today. Nismatu Yisrael b'goyla. We need to have pity on whatever remnant of Jews still remain in our time, so that the ember of the Jewish people is not extinguished. Furthermore, they're torturing these Jews. They're converting them. They're making them do malacha on Shabbos. Also, their life is on the line. And says Yam Shel Shlomo, I paskin, if someone's life is in danger, you're allowed to save them. Says the Yam Shel Shlomo, I heard that when the Marami Rutenberg was captured, they put him in the tower in Einsesheim for many years, and the governor demanded an exorbitant sum, and the community wanted to redeem him, and Marami Rutenberg did not allow it, because he said, Ein poidinas hashun yosim k'dei demeim. And I don't understand why the Marami Rutenberg did that. He was the greatest sage of the Talmud Chacham. He was the greatest sage of the generation. And you're allowed to redeem someone who's muflag b'chachma b'chama min sheba'olam. And even if you're going to say out of his great humility, he didn't want to consider himself like a great Talmud Chacham. What about the Bittul Torah? He writes about himself, he was sitting in darkness, in death, without light, without Torah. He had no Svarim. Why was he not concerned for Bittul Torah? Didn't Klal Yisrael need him? It must be Marami Rutenberg held that if they would redeem him, he was afraid they would do this to all the great Talmidei Chachamim. And there would be not enough money in the world to redeem them. And the Torah would be forgotten. So as a Hoira Asha, he said, no more, don't redeem me. Says Yam Shel Shlomo, I heard that after they captured him and Marami Rutenberg died, they were after the rush. And miraculously the rush was able to run away to Toledo, Totila. Therefore, the Marami Rutenberg said, better that my Chachma should be forgotten than the entire Torah. But now, the $1 million question, Rabbi Sai, is, are you allowed to risk your life to try to save these captives? Is someone allowed to put their life in jeopardy to save another Jew? Yeah, we pray for them. We think about them. We commiserate with them and the families. We empathize. But is a soldier allowed to offer to go on a suicide mission, to go on a dangerous mission to save the life of another Jew? You know, in Shulchan Aruch it says that one is obligated to save the life of another Jew. If you see your friend drowning, or bandits coming upon him, or wild animals, and you could save him, or pay for his saving, and you don't, you're over on Leisaman al Dam Reyecha. But the question is, do you need to put your life in jeopardy to save another Jew? You know where this comes up? Organ donation. Somebody wants to donate an organ to save another Jew. But are you mechuyev to do that? Aren't you putting your life in jeopardy? Are you? So you say, well, nowadays, you're not putting your life in jeopardy. But there was a time you were. And I don't know how clear it is that you're not putting yourself in some kind of peril. So it's interesting. the Yerushalmi says, or what about a case where the Mossad or the IDF says we have a great plan, and it's likely to be successful. But again, it's always a suffix. Are you allowed to endanger your life to save the life of another Jew? The Yerushalmi says you are, and you're mechuyev too. But what's interesting is the Rif, the Rambam, and the Rush do not bring down the Yerushalmi that you're allowed to endanger your life to save another Jew. And the Poskim say it's because they hold the Bavli argues. The bottom line is, Halacha l'maisa, one cannot risk their life to save the life of another Jew. You hear this? Halacha l'maisa, if you're not allowed to put, someone's not allowed to put themselves into safek sakana to save the life of another Jew. Now, maybe if somebody's in the army, it's different, because that's the nature of war. So then it would depend, is it Muhammad's Mitzvah, or it's more than saving the life of another Jew. This is the obligation of the day. Let's speak briefly about giving away, releasing terrorists to save the life of Jewish hostages. So this is a major subject, and we're going to treat a major subject somewhat superficially and very briefly. There's a sefer called Masa Oivadya, which is a compendium of halachos that are related to the state of Israel from the Chidushim Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. And he's specifically talking about Mivtza Anteba, the Antebi rescue. And basically, there were hundreds of Jews who were in peril. The terrorists were, brandishing the sword upon their heads. They gave a deadline, and they said Thursday, the 3rd of Tammuz, at 2 p.m. Either you release, 40 terrorists, or we're going to kill hundreds of Jewish hostages. So, anyway, Rabbi Ovadia says, these wicked people, they exaggerated. So the deadline was pushed off, and in the interim there was a miraculous salvation. But Rabbi Ovadia says, among other things, firstly he says that even though maybe logically, is it reasonable to try to rescue, to have Jews released, and at the expense of releasing terrorists? Do you know how many, possibly thousands of Jews are now in peril because the terrorists are on the street? And by the way, where do they go? They don't just go to, don't think they just go to Israel. They come to this country. Yeah, you say, how do they get in? How do they get in? With thousands of other illegals through the south. What do you mean, how do they get in? But anyway, Rabbi Ovadia says two things. Number one, it might be necessary to rescue hostages, especially if those hostages are Israeli soldiers. Because in order to have a successful army, the morale of the soldiers has to be that if they would ever get captured, the government would do whatever it takes to have them released. And if they don't have that in their minds when they're on the battlefield, and they're in the tanks, and they're in their planes, and they're on the war front, that the country stands behind them, and the government stands behind them, and no matter what, they're going to pay any price to have them released, it would demoralize the morale of the army. That's one logic Rabbi Ovadia says that has to be considered. But then he says something very interesting. Again, something to think about. You'll say, well, if you release a terrorist, you're also putting Jewish lives in peril. Rabbi Ovadia says, yes, you are, but not today. You say, what difference does it make if it's today or later. He says halachically, there's a difference between a clear and present sakana and a future sakana. Namely, the Rabbi Yehuda discusses an autopsy. Are you allowed to do an autopsy for the sake of learning medicine and learning about human anatomy? Because doing an autopsy is nivel hames. You're defiling a body. And the Rabbi Yehuda says, if you're doing an autopsy because this person had an illness, and you have another person sitting in front of you with this illness, and by doing the autopsy, you could save the life of a patient in front of you, so that's called pikuach nefashos. So you're allowed to violate the lav of nivel hames to save the life of a Jewish patient in front of you. But if it's just to gain medical knowledge, to save someone's life in the future, that's not called pikuach nefashos in front of you. And even if, in fact, you will gain medical knowledge, you cannot violate the law of nivel hames to save someone's life in the future. Rav Ovadia Yosef says that would be a similar analogy. If Jews are being held hostage, and they're brandishing the sword against their neck right now, their life is in danger right now, you need to save their life. Yeah, but by releasing the terrorists, you're putting Jewish people's lives in danger in 10 years, or in 5 years, or in 1 year. That might not be called in halacha pikuach nefashos. That's another svara and a factor that Rabbi Ovadia puts in the mix. So Rabbi said this is a very complex subject, but certainly the idea of the morale of the army and the country is an important factor in Pidyon Shvuyim. If it's an issue of duchka de tzibur, it could be that doesn't apply anymore because it's government money and it doesn't really affect the tzibur. On the other hand, if it's a matter of making sure they don't do this again, by the way, the Yam Shel Shloimeh points out that once the Marame Rothenberg said, you can't redeem me, and they didn't redeem the Marame Rothenberg, never again was a great Talmid Chacham captured and held hostage. So there is something to be said for not giving in, not negotiating with terrorists, and on the other hand, there's nothing more valuable in this world than Jewish life. So there's a very sensitive subject, and in the merit of us learning some of the parameters of the subject, Hashem should protect all of Klal Yisrael, that this tzara should not occur, and Hashem should return all Yidden to their mishpachos and to Klal Yisrael, and we should only hear Besuros Tovos. I wish everyone a wonderful day. Bracha v'atzlacha. Amen. Thanks for listening. Kol tov. Yes.
What would the halacha be if the
Yeah.
garment